What you're going to see on the screen now is a video copy, a videoing of a play reading, a dramatized play reading of the first act of Waiting for Godot, done many years ago. And so the place is the old West Hall stage. And it's just a reading of Act 1, but a dramatized reading. Now, we'll play it for a little while at the beginning now while everybody's coming in. And then we'll continue to play it behind, as the lecture proceeds, without the sound. So now we will start the sound. You can now with the sound. The first 4 pages of the play were not recorded well, so somebody is telling me about that. Trying to take off his boots.
Nothing to be done.
I'm beginning to come round to that opinion. All my life I've tried to put it from me, saying, Vladimir, be reasonable. You haven't yet tried everything. And I resumed the struggle. So, there you are again.
Am I?
I'm glad to see you back. I thought you were gone forever.
Me too.
We'll have to celebrate this. But how? Get up till I embrace you.
Not now, not now.
May one inquire where His Highness spent the night?
In a ditch.
A ditch? Where?
Over there.
The first pages are very important, actually.
And they didn't beat you?
Read them. This is
Beat
what
me?
we're missing now.
Well, certainly
The
they
first
beat
pages.
me.
Same lot as usual?
The same? I don't know.
When I think of it. All these years. But for me, where would you be? You'd be nothing more than a little heap of bones at present minute, no doubt about it.
And what of it?
It's too much for one man. At the present minute, no doubt of it.
And what of it?
It's too much for one man. On the other hand, what's the good of losing heart now? That's what I say. We should have thought of it years ago, in the 90s.
Stop blathering and help me off with this boot.
Hand in hand, from the top of the Eiffel Tower, among the first. We were presentable in those days. Now it's too late. They wouldn't even let us up. What are you doing?
I'm taking off my boot. Did that never happen to you?
No, keep it going without the audio, that's all. So they'll have something to watch because they're going to get bored with my lecture. So. I know this is a new announcement, but please don't use your mobiles and your whatever else laptops. They're actually forbidden at most universities. It's written into the syllabus. As I give equivalence for courses taken outside, I notice that when I look at the syllabus, one of the main items is mobiles and laptops are forbidden in class. So take that for what you may. Okay, so I'm supposed to help you understand or try to get into interpreting Waiting for Godot. That's the fly sheet you have in front of you. Okay, this play is to introduce you to one of the more sort of influential movements in the 20th century, theater of the absurd. I want to put this into the framework of 204, of course. But I want to introduce you to what was happening in the world of art generally, and to place this particular play within that movement in the early 20th, the first part of the 20th century, and right up to around 1960, when people who were writing absurdist plays left and went back into either Marxism or Christianity or whatever social world. They went back into more traditional ways of interpreting human life. But interpreting human life as absurd is actually connected very much to something that you've had in Nietzsche, and going back to the Greek tragedians, whom he, of course, loved, a tragic understanding of life, that life is basically tragic. But in the tragic understanding of life, even though there's no clear meaning to a human being using their reason to understand what's going on in life, in the tragic world of a Nietzsche or the Greek tragedians, or generally tragic literature, the human being is the focus. And so it's the activity, the creativity, the potential of the human being to do something for humanity that's focused on. Prometheus is the icon, the figure of this, the one who stole into heaven and stole fire and brought fire to humanity. So whether it was in Nietzsche, where when he says, God is dead, do you know what that means? It's not just God is dead, as yet another philosophy of life or something like that. For Nietzsche, God is dead. Do you know what that means? That means we have to become gods. We have to assume the responsibility that we've been giving to something other than ourselves. So Nietzsche's message really in God is Dead, if you understand him and what he was doing at the time, was an attempt to wake a sleeping society up to become more creative, more proactive, more, to take things into their own hands and not to be depending so much on isms and on religions and whatever else people sort of take, not at their deepest level, but at the sort of the slogan area or the superficial level. So absurdism and existential thinking in the 20th century, a comparison between them, just to place them into this, the movements of the 20th century. Existential thought became very, very important, existentialism. Following Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and looking back to people like Pascal and Augustine and even Socrates, the whole movement, and Dostoevsky, of course, in the 19th century. In the 20th century, the people who became important in the field of existentialism, whether it was atheistic existentialism or Christian existentialism, they all were sharing with what we're going to do this week and in this lecture, sharing a very important aspect of their understanding of what life was all about, and that is that life doesn't make sense. So waiting for Godot primarily is waiting for some serious meaning that a rational, alert, active human being can really accept as truth about life, the real meaning of life. So in the tragic world and in the existentialist world, therefore, they took this as a starting point and then went off beyond it, back into, in existential thinking, the human being. That's our focus, and the creativity and the activity and the of the human being has to be revitalized. Whatever your ism is or whatever your religion is, the focus is the human being is the one who has to primarily work on improving humanity, bringing in the Uberman, whatever your ideology tells you. So to go into this particular play, okay. Basically, Samuel Beckett was born in 1906, in the early 20th century. He died in 1989. Allah li mish mawjood yirhamu. But basically, he died in 1989. So Samuel Beckett, he was born to middle-class Protestant parents in very, 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 very Catholic Ireland. All right? So you can see already the tension in the development of this man. A bright student of modern languages at Trinity College in Dublin. Upon graduation, he taught at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris between 1928 and 1930, returning to Dublin to hold the position of assistant lecturer in French at Trinity College. 2 years later, he left an academic career to travel around Germany and France until in 1937 he decided to settle down permanently in Paris. During World War II, he joined the French Resistance, the Muqawami, working near Avignon as an agricultural laborer. After the war, he settled back in Paris and decided to write in the French language. Thus, many of his most famous works, including Waiting for Godot, were initially created, presented in French, later to be translated by himself into his mother tongue. In 1959, Trinity University bestowed upon him an honorary doctorate in letters, and in 1969 he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. And pay attention to this phrase. Why was he awarded this Nobel Prize? Quote, for writing which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man. Writing that acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man. That's very important to keep in mind. What he thought he was doing through this work, what people thought, certainly appreciated him, is that basically he was not writing a negative, pessimistic work, but rather he was, in a sense, challenging people in this period to really find meaning and not to just accept meaning superficially. So the writing actually elevates you when you really understand the message that he was trying to present through the whole work. It's not meant to sort of depress you. It's, on the contrary, it's meant to push you forwards. Same way that, not in the same way, but as Nietzsche was trying to do with his work in his way, as Socrates was trying to do this to Athens, he was, in this particular work, not from his own point of view, writing a hopeless work, but rather trying to dramatize and express in literature something very important about human experience. The experience that as we search for meaning in life, and the more intelligent we become, the more cultured we become, the more we take CVSP courses seriously and all that sort of stuff, the more we will then be starting to really question the meaning of life. And we start with the meaning of life as given to us in Tariq, what happened? The meaning of life given to us by our society, by our culture, by our family, whatever. We start to question it critically. Not necessarily to lose it. And I think this was the same message really at the heart of Nietzsche. He's not telling you what to believe, and Nietzsche doesn't want you to follow him in his belief and you just become a Nietzschean. And Beckett similarly was not interested in getting Beckettian apostles to follow him just as he was doing. This is the kind of work that's meant to provoke you, to challenge you to think about the meaning of life. In the absurd as such, there is no clear meaning to life finally. And so the challenge is to keep holding on until some meaning can be found. I think that's the basic message of the absurdists and certainly of Beckett here, that don't take any meaning that you have right now or at any simple moment as final and this is meaning. Always challenge it. This is what we give you the slogan, we want you to be critical thinkers. Well, that's what one of the aspects of a critical thinker. Always questioning, always asking, always looking for more, not necessarily abandoning your own views. That's sophomoric. But rather if you are going to keep on with your own ideology, your own beliefs, then make sure you're really thinking about it seriously, dialoguing, comparing it with other views, being truly critical. So, he's written important novels, poems, short stories, in addition to plays and mimes for stage and radio. Okay, he died in 1989 is one thing that I thought 1991, but I better check that. But anyway, that shouldn't really bother you. For any more detailed biographical material, you have the web. I'm not going to spend any more time on biographical material. Now, basically what do we have here? What kind of a play? You try to compare this with some more usual play that you have read somewhere. And if you were taking CVSP fully from 201 through 204, in 201 and now in 205 as well, you read Oedipus the King, the famous play about the man who had to kill his father and marry his mother. No matter what he tried to do, he had to do that. But in doing it, he brings great things. He saves the community twice. He brings knowledge and insight to everybody. This is the model of the Prometheus, of the tragic heroes, where the focus is what the human does, what the human achieves, not what you can't do. The absurd part of that is that But life doesn't really make sense. Why on earth should I have to kill my father and marry my mother? As a rational being, I've tried to do everything possible. And as a political ruler, I've tried to be a very good democratic ruler, it's in the Oedipus play. Yet finally, what result do I get? I get that I have actually killed my father and married my mother, and I'm the source of all the miseries of humanity, of the polis at the time. So he gets no reward in the ordinary sense. But like Nietzsche wasn't thinking of life as rewarding in any normal way. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind when he's attacking things, because he's so provocative and so. But he was saying basically that the meaning of life is taking responsibility for yourself. We have to become gods, so you don't have to take that literally. You don't have to become an atheist if you don't want to. But the point is, whether you're an atheist or not an atheist, the human being is the one who brings good things to humans. But in the tragic view, don't expect reward. In the absurdist view, they don't go that far. The absurdist view just starts with the first part of the tragic, that life does not really make sense to a rational creature who's really thinking critically and trying to understand the meaning of life. It could very well end up in a tragic way, but they don't, he doesn't take a stand. He says, I am the complete agnostic, leaving it up to you to decide where to go from here. But don't miss this basic step that you must face if you really want to have a serious view of life. And this first step is that meaning in life is not just to be taken for granted, something you can reach easily. You have to suffer for it. Nietzsche. Right? If you're not ready to suffer for a Nietzsche, you're never going to move humanity forwards to an Uberman, to a better stage of humanity. So basically here then, what we're focusing on is the aspect in the 20th century, after a lot of disappointment of all of the gods of the Enlightenment and modernity and all the promises that we know, the perfectibility of the human being, endless progress. Remember, Nietzsche says, when I look around, I don't see, I believe in evolution, but I think what we have is the survival of the unfittest, not the fittest. So you see, evolution can be interpreted in many different ways. And for Nietzsche, in his critical view, don't take it for granted that the perfectibility of man, automatic progress, just because there's science and technology, the human is going to sort of have no horizon in how far we can go. If you really want an Uberman, if you really want somebody, you want to improve your own humanity and to seek to improve humanity generally, then don't do the benign things of benefiting mankind or any of the slogans that you hear about. You're going to have to suffer, baby, just like Nietzsche suffered, like Oedipus suffered, like Prometheus had to suffer. You're going to have to suffer. But in doing that, you bring something very, very important. Here, that's taking a stand. You see, that's a tragic view of human life, but with the focus on the heroism and the importance of being a hero, of suffering, of spending your life not looking for happiness, but looking for greatness and excellence and forwardness. Here, the first part of that is focused on that life does not make meaning. You can't find the meaning of life easily just from what you're getting, etc., etc. No matter how brilliant you think you are, how many books you've written, however your current society, what they cheer you on with, you have to. You're responsible for yourself as a human being first of all, and that you do the very best. So, how does Sophocles presents this in a normal play, a play, it has a beginning, it has a subject, it has characters, then you can understand what they represent clearly, all right? And then it has an action and moves forward to its climax, and then it has a conclusion. This is how we usually think of when we think of a play. It has a subject, it has a topic, it has an issue, and it proceeds with it in a way that's logical, consistent. You can follow what's happening to its climax and then to its conclusion, what it gives. Here we have a play, so when you go to watch it, it's a play, it's at a theater, but it's not quite the same. Here, what we have in this particular play, the stage setting, is simply like a moon. If you've ever seen a satellite image of the moon, the surface of the moon, it's kind of like a surrealistic picture of no place. All right, and so immediately you're put into the atmosphere of symbolism and allegory, and so the four characters are going to have symbolic meaning. The four characters in the play are the two tramps, And they're wearing, if you notice, they're wearing sort of Charlie Chaplin type clothes, which indicates that they were rich at some point. Humanity, you know, the European civilization, if you like, if you want to take that as the thing, was very, you know, fruitful and rich and all this, but now it is decaying. And the clothes that they're wearing, like a Charlie Chaplin costume, if you ever see Charlie Chaplin movies, you know, they're fancy clothes, but they're sort of, you know, they've had their day, and they are tramps. Okay, they're just, so we as humanity, we're just, you know, we're nowhere in terms of meaning. You know, we're just, you know, out there somewhere. Okay. We relate to one another, but then as we see the relationships moving on, we see that basically Vladimir and Estragon are kind of symbolizing all human relationships of some sort of equality, okay? Not like student-teacher relationships where the student is superior and oppresses the teacher, but rather, you know, friend-friend type of thing, peers, equals, okay? You could smile when I try to crack a joke, it's all right. But basically, you know, it's sort of a symbolic thing for all relationships of friends, husband, wife, you know, to whatever. It's things that are, you know, meant to be something where you have mutual understanding, people understand each other, they can cooperate and, you know, in some understandable way. We as human beings are like Vladimir and Estragon. We're someplace geographically, but in meaning, you know, where are we? You know, where do we come from? Where are we going? What's the meaning of life? We're thrown into the world, all right? Now what he's talking about is when you start to think. At one point you might come to deciding, you know, there's nothing really in terms of meaning that I can really hold on to as something that's real and clear. Meaning is always ambiguous. And in these relationships, as you're reading the play, the way Beckett presents it is they never understand each other. They speak a lot, lots of talking and speaking, but no communication. Language has broken down. Language is the primary means of communicating with somebody else and then being able to build civilization and all that sort of stuff. But language itself, so as you read the play, much better if you could actually watch it, because then, you know, the point comes across better if it's done well. Basically, when you're reading the text, don't look for any clear meaning of the text. Understand that the language is being used to convey this notion, this reality for Beckett, that there is no clear understanding of what's going on in life, where we are, where we come from, where we're going. So notice that kind of thing happening as you do read it. Okay, basically, so they have no idea of, you know, the setting then is just simply a no place. Events follow one another in no sort of sequence that's leading anywhere. The beginning is like the end, and the end is like the beginning. Once we did an absurdist play here in the old West Hall, and we ran it forwards, and then we ran it backwards. And the audience didn't realize we were doing the same play, but backwards. So that you get the notion that there's no, you know, we're not going anywhere, we're not moving anywhere, communication has broken down, there's no simple meaning. Time doesn't behave itself here. You know, we don't know what time is it. Were we here yesterday? Were we not here yesterday? Nothing is clear. That's what he's trying to present through the whole, the way he presents the medium of giving us this message. So we're not comfortable as we would in a normal play. We don't really know who they are or where they come from or what they're doing. You know, no clear definition of the characters. All right, they're symbolic. Two other characters come in, Pozzo and Lucky. All right, a little bit later, this thing has stopped. I don't know what's happening to it. By now, we should be seeing Pozzo and Lucky. Pozzo and Lucky represent the kind of oppressor-oppressed relationships in humanity. Okay, employer-employee, master-slave, presented as a master, a rich, supposedly landowner with his slave, Lucky. But again, there's nothing clear. Who is the master? Who is the slave? Lucky represents reason, and reason has broken down. You know, the whole ideal of the Enlightenment that, you know, through reason and the progression of reason, everything can be moved forwards. I'm going to read you a little bit from the speech by Lucky, which is on pages 36 and 37 of your book. It's the longest speech in the whole of the work. And Lucky now is being forced to entertain them. Now, we've understood that he represents reason, and that once, he used to be very wonderful, and he taught Pozzo how to think. And so they want to be entertained. Well, how do you want to be entertained? Do you want to be entertained with a dance? Do you want to be entertained by a CBSP lecture? How would you like to be entertained? He said, we want to watch him think. Thinking, you see, is the subject here. What is the tradition of thinking that has sort of been accepted as the only way? What has happened to the ideals of the Enlightenment and clarity and clear knowledge? This is Lucky now. Given the existence, as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman, of a personal God, quack, 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 with white beard, quack, 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 outside time without extension, who from the heights of divine apathia, divine athambia, divine aphasia, loves us dearly, with some exceptions, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, and suffers like the divine Miranda, with those who, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torment, plunged in fire, whose fire flames, if that continues, and who can doubt it will fire the firmament, that is to say, blast hell to heaven, so blue, still, and calm, so calm with a calm which, even though intermittent, is better than nothing, but not so fast, and considering what's more, that is a result of the labors left unfinished, crowned by the Academy of Anthropometry, of Essie and Posse, of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all doubt, all other doubt than that which clings to the labors of men, that is a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cunard. It is established as hereinafter, but not so fast for reasons unknown, that it is a result of the public works of Puncher and Watman. It is established beyond all doubt that in view of the labors of Fartov and Belcher, left unfinished for reasons unknown of Testu and Cunard, left unfinished, it is established what many deny, that man in Posse of Testu and Cunard, that in spite of the strides of alimentation and defecation, is seen to waste and pine, and concurrently, simultaneously, what's more, for reasons unknown, in spite of the strides of physical culture, practice of sports such as tennis, football, running, cycling, swimming. You want me to stop, right? Flying, floating, riding, gliding, conating, camogging. I'm going to read it. All right. I'm enjoying it. I don't know about you are. Skating, tennis of all kinds, dying, flying, sports of all sorts. Autumn, summer, winter, tennis of all kinds, of hockey of all sorts, of penicillin and succedonia. In a word, I resume, and concurrently, simultaneously, for reasons unknown, to shrink and dwindle in spite of the tennis. I resume flying, gliding, glove, over 9 and 18 holes, tennis of all sorts. In a word, for reasons unknown, in Feckham, Peckham, Fulham, Clapham, namely, concurrently, simultaneously. What's more, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, to shrink and dwindle, I resume, Fulham, Clapham, in a word, the dead loss per cuppet since the death of Bishop Berkeley, being to the tune of 1 inch 4 ounce per cuppet, approximately by and large, more or less to the nearest decimal, good measure, round figures, stark naked in the stockinged feet in Connemara, in a word, for reasons unknown, no matter what matters, the facts are there, considering what's much more grave than that in the light of the labors lost. Okay, this is symbolically reason, and Nietzsche had a wonderful quotation. I think I put it on the slides of if you watch the PowerPoint of my Nietzsche lecture, about reason and how it is being understood, not against reason, but the understanding of what is reason, and is it just this thing that produces sort of stuff that will give you a nice commercial life and a nice, mediocre, middle-class, happy life and all this? Is that what reason's all about, just being operating in that direction? Or shouldn't reason be what Nietzsche was trying to impress people upon, what Socrates was trying to do it in ancient Greece, what every serious person who's helped people to use reason better, to get them, to provoke them, because you need a provocation, you need a wake-up call, a Socratic shock, to really come out of that cave. If you ever took Plato's cave story, you need a shock to come out of your cave of happiness and comfort and mediocrity and all of this. You need a shock, and so Socrates called himself a shocker, a Polis fly, and Nietzsche, of course, was saying, you never help a point of view better than by seriously attacking it, because it will wake up the people who sort of are holding on to it because it's sort of been it's going to get them a ticket to heaven, or it's going to make them fashionable, or it's going to make them whatever. If that's what you're living for, these people are telling you in this 204 period. Every one of them, Freud telling you, you're not just the conscious self, but you're the unconscious. In their own way, each of these people are trying to wake us up wherever we are. Now in the 21st century, all their their intent is still there. It's still very important to be shocked, to be provoked, to really think critically, not just let critical thinking mean you now believe something, different from what people believed before. It's your whole humanity that's in touch. So, basically, what does he say, about the meaning of the play? Well, first of all, the four characters. Now, there's a fifth character, sorry. So first, you have the first two representing friend, equal relationships, things that you try to find empathy in and contact and communication and all this. Pozzo and Lucky represent all master-slave, all human relationships that always have somebody oppressing somebody, all right? And they're all kind of flattened out. There's no real hierarchy. No serious, Pozzo isn't really a master, and Lucky's not really a slave. Who's the slave? Who's the master? Vladimir and Estragon never really communicate with one another. They stick together just because physical aloneness would be horrible. The only reason why they want, they say why they stay together, because they can't stand each other. But it's better than nothing. At least we have physical contact with somebody. Pozzo and Lucky are the master-slave thing, which Hegel played around with and others played around with philosophically, but here it's kind of just humanly being presented that basically, the oppressor is in many ways the oppressed, and the oppressed is in many ways the oppressor, and there's no clear meaning in life so that you seek to be the president or the prime minister, or you seek to be the zaim in your party or something like that, and that's going to give you, some kind of meaning in life. That meaning has to be much deeper, much more profound, cost you more in the tragic world. You're never going to find real meaning without the suffering. But that suffering is what is your greatness and what can then bring you to something much better. Here in this play, it's just that aspect of the tragic, if you like, of there's no clear meaning. So it's like a Rorschach test. Any of you psychology students, you ever looked at a Rorschach test? You get an ink blot and you ask you splatter it on a blank sheet. And then in psychotherapy or whatever, you ask the patient to start to, what do you see here? There's no objective meaning there. So as the patient tells you what they see there, you start to understand and be able to help the patient get a clearer view of what's going on in that person's life. So this is one way a Rorschach test is just to see, how you are looking at life, your perspective of what's going on there. So that's what this is. You have to read this, you have to try to understand the message behind it, what it's trying to present to you. But from his point of view, there's no clear meaning there. He says, if you find meaning in it, that's your business. But don't blame me if it gives you a headache. Buy your own aspirin. If you want to interpret this play the way I'm doing today, for instance, he's always objecting to finding system in his play because, Marxists find in it, this is a presentation of, the oppressed classes, the state of the working classes, the condition of the working classes in modern capitalist society. Christians find in it, this is the state of humanity when they depart from God. You see the fallen man waiting for a savior. You can interpret this in many, and had been at the time starting to be interpreted in this way. So Beckett, said, well, if you find your own meaning in it, and if it gives you a headache as you're trying to interpret it and look into it, don't blame me. He said, my work is simply a question of fundamental sounds. Fundamental sounds. And to somebody understanding the connotation of that in the English language, in the theater language, it meant belching and farting. All right? It's just at the level of, just making fundamental sounds. And you see what you find in fundamental sounds. Not literally, but in other words, that's his meaning of it. If it has overtones and if the undertones, you find meaning in it, the way I'm trying to present in a lecture at CS, well, that's my problem. And if I'm giving you a headache, that's still my problem. But it's your own problem for not just walking out and just not wanting an interpretation. So some reactions to the play. Some people thought it was the greatest play. It was revelation. This was the prophet of the 20th century who was bringing new revelation to us all. One of the best critics, theater critics of the 20th century, in that period certainly, Harold Hobson of England, said, when I went and watched this play, it had the same effect on me as the trip to Damascus of Paul. You see, in the Christian world, Paul was the Pharisee who was persecuting the Christians, and then, you know, Jesus appears to him, and so then he goes into a conversion period, and he starts to, you know, he turns around 180 degrees and becomes one of the main leaders of the Christians. Well, he compared that shock to, you know, the shock that it gave him as a cultured man of the mid-20th century. So some people thought this was great. Others thought this is just charlatanism. This guy is making us pay money to buy a ticket to come to a play that, you know, doesn't give us anything. So, you know, is this what do you think of it? Is up to you to decide. Some people thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Others thought it was just a waste of time. And let me just entertain you a little bit with something that happened to Beckett himself, where very interesting. He was knifed by somebody as he was walking on the road in Paris. So this is a little bit about what happened to him. On the night of the 6th of January 1938, Samuel Beckett was stabbed in the chest by a French pimp, French pimp named Robert Jules Prudent. Prudent is prudent, okay, that's his name, while walking home with friends. Narrowly missing his left lung and heart, the blow confined him to a Paris hospital for over 2 weeks. When Beckett later met the improbably named Prudent in court and asked why he had attacked, the Frenchman responded wryly, "Je sais pas, monsieur, je m'excuse. Next charge." So, in hindsight, it all seems like an episode out of one of Beckett's own plays, highlighting, as it does, the absurd contingency of life. Life seems to be full of contingency. You never really know what's happening when you really are starting to think about it deeply. The untoward and irrational behavior of the down and out. Amused by his assailant's response, "Je sais pas, je m'excuse. I don't know why. Sorry." You know, next charge, he's in court. Amused by his assailant's response and ever wary of guarding his privacy, he was a very private man, Beckett chose not to press charges against the man. In a gesture of qualified compassion, he had already written from the hospital to his friend Thomas McGreevy that he found his assailant more cretinous than malicious. You know what cretinous means? All right? More stupid, you know, more cretinous than malicious. Because Beckett never divulged his inner feelings about the episode, we can only surmise the extent to which it colored his imagination and might have prompted the composition of later masterpieces of human dejection, like Waiting for Godot and Endgame. So that's, you know, this is just an interesting item that I came across recently. You know, that this is in a sense what Nietzsche calls the autobiography of a philosopher, if you like. Now, philosophy can come in many ways, not just in philosophy. You know, a philosophy of life, meaning an understanding of the real basic things about life. It's always the autobiography. You know, the subject is there, and when you miss the subject and you look for just objectivity, you don't get the full picture of what's happening. The more you understand it's the autobiography of a human being, therefore it's serious. The subject is behind it. The subject supposedly is living what he's saying. He's not just, you know, pontificating. But basically, you know, it's a perspective, all right? It's not subjective in the negative sense of the word. It's the product of a subject, of a human being, of the serious life of a serious human being. So for this gentleman, who seemed to be very consistent with himself, you know, he seemed to live really as the complete agnostic, refusing to take positions, but continuing to write materials that kind of presented in theater and in novels and in other things. This vision of, you know, you cannot escape this aspect of humanity. So in this particular work, then, that he's writing about, some people reacted as if it was wonderful. Some people reacted as if it was, you know, just sort of, you know, getting us to pay money and charlatanerie and trying to confuse us, you know, and sort of picking holes in our wonderful European civilization and trying to make us believe that it's all for nothing. Others were finding, no, there's something very serious here if you can put your fingers on it. Okay, now I'm down to, I mentioned there number 6 on your fly sheets, Peter Sellers. Anybody here ever heard of Peter Sellers? Okay, it's beyond you now. Okay, but you can get a movie called Being There. Peter Sellers was one of the great comedians of the 20th century. And so in Being There, the movie there presented something like this. This is basically the notion of that Heidegger had, in the great philosopher in the early 20th century. He sort of summarized human life at its beginnings so that you can understand it better. You need to come to the realization you are like someone who's been thrown into the world. You don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going, there's no sort of meaning that's easily given to you. You're thrown into the world. In this movie, which I thought was a wonderful depiction of this, that Peter Sellers plays the part of a retarded gardener. When the people who are taking care of him die, they come and kick him out. The owners of the thing come and kick him out, and he's thrown out into the world. He doesn't know much about himself. He looks fine. He looks normal. People sort of meet him, and they start reading into him all kinds of meanings. Which he'd say something and they'd find some deep meaning in it. He'd say something else, they'd find some deep meaning in it. And so what happens now, this is a picture of sort of the civilization of that was being presented, that basically, little by little, he's pushed up the social and political ladder, so he becomes a serious candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. Right? Not because he has anything to offer, but because he has that feature of being, allowing everybody to see what they have in them. So it's a very interesting, a very entertaining movie, and it's still out there in Being There if you look it up. Now, how am I going to give you a headache more sort of carefully? That's the rest of the fly sheet under number 7, and I don't have much time, but let me just at least point to the main things that are on that thing. How can one sort of try to present this within 204? Well, one aspect, it follows a kind of philosophical stream with Heidegger and about questioning metaphysics and questioning traditional ideas and presentations in philosophy and other things. That the human being has to think for themselves and discover their own identity, not just accept it from the outside. And so we are like, starting off, we're thrown into the world. Okay? Then where we go from there and when we find meaning, that's going to be, not an easy journey, and it's not going to be very simple. Okay, but if you don't face that aspect of life, the absurdity of life, other people following in this Heideggerian type of thinking, Malraux in the 20th century, for instance, will say the essence of life is anguish, meaningless mortality, meaning when you really start to think, the first thing that really hits you solidly as a human being is the Gilgamesh question, if you've taken 201 or 205. Why do we have to die? Okay? And, that's not just a simple thing. Oh, well, we all have to die. It's a normal, natural thing. Fine, but as a human, that's never fully satisfying. So some people freeze their bodies so that when medical science improves, they can then heal them or something like that. The question of death is a very serious thing. Now, what in this type of Heideggerian thinking that's presented in this work is that basically the first thing, meaningless mortality. You're going to die, but there's no serious reason for it. There's nothing that a rational human being can accept as something rational. Why should I have to die? It's not just, so you get different answers to it, fine, but it's, meaningless, not just mortality. Mortality is okay, it's just a biological fact or whatever, but that it has no meaning. So that sort of thing leads you on to thinking beyond that. So if you come down to 7b, well, first of all, 7a, what he says about his work is that it's a direct presentation, a distillation of the very essence of life. What he wants you to see if he can communicate to you through this play, kind of his vision of what life is really all about finally, the bottom line, we would say today. All right? And so, and he says, you see, under 7a1, this is a quotation from him, the only fertile research, investigation, that a critical thinker wants to look for, that an artist wants to present, is excavatory, immersive, a contracting of the spirit, a descent. The artist is active, but negatively, not just presenting all sorts of things outward, but shrinking from the nullity of extra-circumferential phenomena, drawn into the core of the eddy of things. What the artist should be doing is presenting you something serious for you to think about and to experience about life itself, not just sort of abstractions or theoretical conclusions. So this, of course, is the stuff of much of great literature. Plato's Cave was meant to be a presentation of that. Dante's Hell, Heaven, Purgatory are meant to be, presentations of things like that, of what's the basic meaning of life, finally, in their own ways. But what he's saying there is something also that's very important now for this particular context of, we're all looking at things intellectually and looking for, scientific and philosophical, logical conclusions and, intellectual reductionism of the complex concreteness of life. This is the heart of existential philosophy. Truth in life is finally subject and concrete and lived. So all of your fancy abstraction has no meaning unless it clearly is a presentation and a help for people to understand more seriously the heart of what human life is finally all about at the core of the eddy, at the bottom line. So beware of intellectual reductionism of the complex concreteness of life. That much of intellectual thinking, as important as it is, it's not that it's not important, but if you think that's a final presentation of life, if you think you could read a philosophy book or whatever book and it's going to tell you all about your life, then you haven't really seen yet that life is an abyss, and you're at the surface, and that if you don't get into the abyss, and you're not going to get that through any sort of abstract or theoretical or argumentation sort of thing. That's all very important for many things in life, but for your own humanity, the existential meaning of your humanity, you have to get more and more into understanding and living the main things that you're talking about in life. So, under B, we have there man as thrown into the world. Okay, one word about this. This is a bad presentation of Picasso's Guernica, and this is the other major movement that this play fits into. The movement of moving away from realism and documentary, like TV or documentaries or something like that, in the world of art generally. Moving away from this kind of scientific determinism and naturalism and realism that had come to be the basic way of presenting, the acceptable way of doing theater and doing all of the other arts. Immediately a reaction came to this whole movement, which was the opposite. That what the artist should be doing, what the serious philosopher should be doing, what everybody should be doing really is trying to go through the surface into the abyss, into presenting things that will challenge you to think about the deepest aspects of your own human life. And so art becomes not realistic, but surrealistic, expressionistic, different words are given to it, cubism, all kinds of things come as a reaction. So Picasso, of course, in the world of art, is an excellent example of this. Guernica, this is a presentation of how you might be living and existentially knowing what was happening in the Civil War in Spain, all right, in that period of time. Okay, the whole of everything was being fragmented, like a bomb is thrown, la samahallah, into this room, and then everything gets fragmented. That there's something about that. Life is complex and concrete, and it's never as simple as just seeing a nice landscape or something like that. The artist should be going beyond that. Now we have photography, we have, we can all the things that can represent things well. But what the artist should be doing, what the philosopher should be doing, is helping us get into the kind of raw meaning, existential meaning of life. So this play fits into that stream, the anti-realism stream that was going on at the time. Symbolism, bringing the subject out into expression, not just objective and scientific determinism, and you're determined by your, like Freud, you're determined by your id and social and political determinism. The environment determines you. These are all determining factors, but they don't determine you. This was the existential revolt. Existence, not live. We're all living, but we're not existing. Existing means standing out. Meaning, having our own word to say, rebelling, being different from just simply, living, etc. So, in these two worlds, the philosophical world of being thrown out into the world where you have to really be challenged to find meaning, and the artistic context of presenting things symbolically and deeper than just realism, this is where it fits in. So, solitude, okay, Nietzsche had already said, I'd rather be solitary than part of the herd, the meaning of that. So solitude is what will get you to understand life. You can never go beyond that. If you don't see that at some point in your life, you understand how alone you are. Nobody understands you properly. There's no good God or rational God who is taking care of you. You are out there on your own. All right? This is the end of individualism. Individualism leads into this kind of a feeling. I'm totally alone, and that's what the play is presenting. Each one is not loneliness, it's existential solitude, alienation. Somehow we're cut off from our true reality. No fellowship, empathy, communication, the impotence of language. The essence of life is anguish, meaningless mortality, monotony, everything's at the same level, master, slave, whatever, there's no, it's not boring, but there's no clear hierarchy. This has more meaning than this, and that's what I'm going to go for. No, everything has the same meaning. All of this is the atmosphere of the absurd. Okay, that's under A. The atmosphere of the absurd, A and B there. That's what absurd means. This kind of atmosphere. Solitude, impotence of no communication, language is broken down, the awareness of death and no real meaning for it. Everything is at the same value. Finally, when you've tried everything, you think this is so wonderful. You find everything really is at the same human final level. And the threat of nothingness. He says silences and pauses are pouring into this play like water into a sinking ship. So when you get to a silence, you get to a pause as you read it. What he's saying, this is the threat of nothingness. At any moment you can be extinguished. You just simply, be a nothing rather than a being, and you'll be a nothing. So this is the atmosphere of the absurd. Nothing hears you, nothing cares about you, all right? You're left on your own. The human response, as I've said before, can be in the tragic mode. So you get it in Shakespeare, you get it in Dostoevsky, you get it in Malraux, you get it in Sartre, you get it in Camus, you get it way back to Sophocles. This basic response to the absurdity of life, which then, is one way of understanding the tragic and one way of understanding contemporary and modern and contemporary existential thinking. Commitment, authenticity, choice, responsibility, absolute freedom when you get to a Sartre and the atheistic, you are God, all right? In Christian existentialism, it means, you're expected to be in the image and likeness of God, not a slob who just wants to go to heaven or something, but rebel creator, you're supposed to bring something in the Promethean, the Faustian fashion. So, what is it for Beckett? For Beckett, it's the waiting. That's the title of the play. We wait, but waiting is a challenge. To wait means you don't quickly jump to a conclusion about something. You're still looking for something that has real meaning. And so you wait, okay? Life is like a tragicomedy. It's not like a tragedy, it's not like a comedy, it's kind of a combination of both. You're kind of in a paralysis, an intellectual paralysis when you want to find final meaning. So what should you do? You should wait. And waiting kind of like, the New World Order, the New Middle East, there's always something, the Brave New World, there's always slogans that you're waiting for. But I want to just end this with one image for you. My favorite creature is the donkey. I played a part like that in Midsummer's Night's Dream, and my friend told me this, you're typecast for that. But a donkey, you put a carrot on a stick in front of a donkey, and he's running after the carrot, all right? So we are like donkeys running after a carrot, something serious, you see. Now, we can't be hopeless because, maybe the stick will break and we can get to the carrot, but maybe not. You never know. You're in kind of like a stasis, an equilibrium, intellectually. Now, not, you live your life and all that, but if you're really trying to find meaning according to Beckett and this absurdist view, basically, you're like a donkey running after a carrot. Therefore, Godot stands primarily for whatever it is that is still allowing you to go on. Because suicide would be stupid. Presuming that you are really going to have hope would be stupid. If you really want to follow the facts of life, for him at that point, you are waiting. Something might happen, you can't ever tell, and give you meaning and solve all this. But don't think you can get the carrot easily. So Godot is for each one of us, whatever it is that keeps us striving, keeps us looking, keeps us moving, keeps us being critical of where we are, whatever keeps us going. It gives us hopeless hope, minimal hope when I wrote this lecture, but then I read somebody called Sastre, not Sartre, and he called it hopeless hope. That's the best way of thinking of it. Life is not without hope, but it's kind of a hopeless hope. You never know. You know enough to go on so that you don't stop living, but don't too quickly reach and think, I know. Remain in the Socratic view that he's the wisest man in Athens because he's the only one who continues to know he does not know. That's the critical stance. Not that I'm not knowing nothing in the literal sense, but there's so much more. I never reached the final human expression of truth, finally, something like that. Thank you.